The fatal fire at Loafers Lodge in Newtown, Wellington has devastated the city, with 6 bodies found inside the damaged part of the building yesterday and others still unaccounted for. Mayor of Wellington, Tory Whanau no ngā ruahine, Pakakohi, has been at the site and she's with us now. Tēnā koe, Mayor Whanau. Thank you for joining us and sorry it's under these circumstances.
Well, tēnā koe. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, are you able to let us know what's going on at the site currently and whether police have been able to enter the building?
So as it stands, they're still doing safety assessments to determine when our police can go in. We are hoping it is quite soon, over the next few hours, and that will really allow us to figure out how this fire occurred and the final, I want to be careful about the words that I use here, but of course the loss of lives,
Yep.
that has certainly created a lot of anxiety and sadness. We're in very much a bit of a nervous waiting mode, because the best case scenario is that we have no more deaths, but we won't know that for sure until the police have entered the building.
Do you know anything more about whether the fire was deliberately lit? There was some talk earlier that it was considered suspicious.
Yeah, there's been some discussion about that, but after speaking to the police, they just have no confirmation of that yet, and that'll be one of the first things that they aim to identify when they enter the building.
Now, the Loafers Lodge building has been a bank, a church, and most recently temporary housing, and was only issued with a building warrant of fitness by council in March. Do you have any further information on this?
Yeah, that's correct. So it was given a warrant of fitness, which was issued by an independent reviewer with the current building standards that we have. Unfortunately, those standards do not include sprinklers, which we've been told now by friends that would have certainly helped the situation. So while the building is currently compliant, it's certainly opened up questions. Are our building standards up to scratch? And how can we prevent this from happening again? Because obviously we don't ever want this to happen again.
Mayor Whanau, the lodge had safety fire alarms, but no sprinklers, as you mentioned. Will there be checks on other similar accommodations, particularly for those needing emergency accommodation in Wellington?
Absolutely. So I've instructed our council officers to not only dig into this building and gather as much information as possible to give over to the police. I've asked them to identify a number of other buildings which could do with an urgent check, so we can prepare and see if we need to put some measures in place to keep those people safe. That is absolutely paramount. The safety of all of our residents is at the top of my agenda.
Now, I understand there are around 94 people in the hostel at the time of the fire. Have you been able to catch up, speak with any of the survivors?
Yes, so we've had a couple that have visited us on the site outside the hostel and have spoken to us and media. One gentleman was quite upbeat, but I would almost say he was also suffering from shock. He can't find a friend of his that was in there, and so he's still kind of wandering around and can't even imagine what he's going through. We've had a lot of our councillors go down to the emergency centre that had been set up yesterday to talk to a lot of the residents. They were deeply distressed and angry and confused, as you would be. While we have a diverse range of people from different backgrounds in that hostel, many are vulnerable. So adding this level of stress on top of that, of course, will impact them in the future. So it's incredibly important that we continue working with MSD and other agencies to ensure that they have what they need. By 10 p.m. last night, they were all put into temporary accommodation,
Okay.
but we will need to find longer term accommodation, and that's what MSD
So
are tasked with
what
right
about
now.
what they're dealing with in their heads, what their mental capacity at this point? Is there any process or anything that's been set up to help support this?
Yes, so MSD and other community groups are on hand to offer them mental health support. But what we're also putting together, or have put together, is a mayoral relief fund. So council have put in 50,000, and I've actually just received a message now to give me an update of what's in there. So on top of the 50,000 that was given by council to the mayoral relief fund, $500,000 has been raised from the general public, and it's exactly this fund that'll go towards that day-to-day support that families of the victims who passed and those have been displaced, we can give that support. So I'm just overwhelmed.
Yep.
I just got that figure now, and I'm just so deeply proud of our community for giving.
And who will be distributing these funds? Is it the mayor's office?
It's the Mayor's Office in partnership with Wellington City Mission. So we're just sorting out the memo in terms of reference now, but it is to go. I've instructed that it's to go directly, to our people who've been impacted. But Wellington City Mission, we know they do the good work. They have a major part in this.
Mayor Whanau, give us an idea of the kind of impact that this tragedy has had on your community in Wellington.
It's definitely there's been a huge sense of grief over the city, sadness, and I've had while I've felt that sadness, I've also felt a deep sense of pride in how our community has come together to be patient with what's happening so that we can provide support to emergency services as well as those impacted by the fire. A lot of donations, a lot of business support or offers from businesses, sorry, to ensure that everyone's looked after. It's shown me what a resilient community that we have, how much we care, how well our emergency services and council have worked together to deal with this situation quickly. Yes, there'll be questions in the long term about how this occurred and what we can do to avoid it in future. But in terms of how the city has managed this awful tragedy, I'm really proud of everyone involved.
Now, I just want to talk very briefly about the incredible emergency services, fans, fire, ambulance, police. What's their mental well-being like at this point, knowing what, or if they're injured, how they're coping with this kind of
Yeah.
tragedy?
So earlier yesterday, I spoke to the chief who had been on site at the time, putting out the blaze. So he was able to tell me how the firefighters were feeling after going through that. And look, they're going through a really tough time. This will impact them mentally, and we're on hand here to help support them through that. I also have concerns about the police. They'll have to go in and do their investigation. They will see some things that no person should have to see. So again, I hope our community will come together and thank our emergency services for the wonderful work that they've done. Our firefighters saved a lot of lives. They saved lives in the last 24 hours. And we know people who work in that profession, that's the last thing they think of. They're just going to think about what they didn't do. And we need to ensure as a community that, the whole city, the whole country is behind them.
And the special people that run towards a fire. Mayor of Wellington, Tory Whanau.
Honestly, thank you.
Look, thank you so much for joining us today, and sorry again that this tragedy has affected your city. Ngā mihi.
Ngā mihi.